Hello. So, I would like to introduce and talk about the non-energy types. So, these account for approximately 30% of the population, the 70 being the generators, half being emotional, half being non-emotional, pure generators. And that 30% that remains are either manifestors, reflectors, and projectors. So I'll begin with the manifestor. Way back in days of old, the manifestor was the top dog, alpha human, the alpha of the alpha. This was the king, in essence, because the manifestor basically told the generators what to do, and the generators just did it. Nowadays, we call them the workforce. Way back in the days, say, of ancient Egypt, they were called slaves. And thankfully, we have workman's compensation now, so things are different, right? The manifestors have a very powerful connection to the life force energy. However, being a non-energy type, they do not have a defined sacral chakra. And because the center is undefined, the relationship to it is different than that of the generator. Where the generator has a constant hum, constant buzz of this engine running, the manifestor has another connection to the throat in particular, to the center of manifestation and communication. And these people have a rhythm within themselves that they're building. And there's something called the strategy. And the strategy for a manifestor is to inform the people around them, the people that matter to them, of their next move. Because manifestors tend to make a big decision. And that's just the way they are. So their strategy is a bit unnatural to them. It's not so much a mechanical strategy as it is a psychological strategy. And so for the manifestor, it's beneficial to inform those around them of their next big move. Their not self theme is that of anger. So there is no rage like that of a manifestor who has been thrown off from what they were doing. Especially an unemotional manifestor who's picking up on somebody's emotional wave that can just reflect it right back at them. It's quite a powerful force. However, that's the negative reflection of their theme. Manifestors, that they go through anger when they're not functioning properly. However, when operating correctly, the signature of a manifestor is actually that of peace. So when a manifestor is making decisions with the mind, they're making decisions to try and bring them peace, rather than just being at peace from correct behavior. And so the reflector is a very interesting and fascinating force. They're said to just live off the program itself. The program being the biological programming mechanism of evolution over time, And the way in which the reflector lives is kind of different from everybody else in the sense that they can be on their own. They don't really need us. They don't need other people like you or I do, most likely. The reflector accounts for as little as 2% of the population. Going back to the manifestor for a moment, that's around 8% of the population are manifestors. And about 2% are the reflectors, which is the most rare of the 4 types of people, the 4 types of auras, the 4 types of bodies that we can live within. And so that reflector is a very interesting type. They have this ability to be so sensitive to the program because they don't have any defined centers. Of all the 9 energy centers, or originally called chakras, out of all 9, they're none of them are fixed in definition, making them a reflector. And so when you're looking at a reflector, you're actually looking at the program itself coming through them cleanly. There is no cleaner channel than a reflector. They just recognize the program for what it is, in a way the rest of us can only dream of. Our dreams don't even compare to what they experience. So when the mind is wrapped up in conditioning for a reflector, their experience is that of disappointment, because they're able to very clearly see how it didn't meet the expectations of what it could have been something different. Because they can very clearly see not simply the conditioning, but the way in which things work. And they recognize with surprise when they see something that stands out, something that shocks the system. It's, oh, that's different. That doesn't fit the norm. When in reality, the norm is a mind-controlled state. But these reflectors have a deep, deep awareness of the way in which the mind is working that the rest of us can only imagine. And even that hardly compares to the experience of a reflector. And that feeling of surprise, the real signature of a reflector is the feeling of surprise and recognizing something standing out. Because really, life is quite a magnificent thing, and when they're tuned in, they can always find something standing out. 20% of the population, projectors. So the projector is actually the newest type. Up until 1781, there were only 3 types: the generator, the manifestor, and the reflector. And then 1781, coming the shift into the 9-centered being that we are today, brought about the 4th type, the projector. The projector, in essence, in its potential, has usurped the throne as the real kingpin or the linchpin or the ones who are really running the show of this physical world when you get down to what's actually happening. Because the people who are really creating the world, building it, generating it, and destroying it, those are the generators, as we know. The generators are responsible for this physical plane and this world we exist in. However, 1781 brought about the 9-centered being and the projector. And so the projector has a magnificent mental capacity to recognize systems and how things work. And not only that, they have a beautiful signature of success because they recognize the way in which things work. And when they witness somebody come along who's having a tough time, they can share with them the correction for that. They're like, oh, no, actually, if you look at it like this, you're going to have a better time. Oh, no, actually, if you do this, how about, well, why don't you try that out? And by giving success to other people, success becomes inherent in their life for a projector operating correctly. However, when they get wrapped up in the mind games and trying to pretend to be a generator or a manifester, because we're all being conditioned to be what we're not by the world. When they're operating out of that conditioning, they're just going to create bitterness within themselves. And that bitterness comes from the mechanics. It's just the physics. For you see, out of these 4 types, the way in which we operate is distinct and different one to another. So most of us, 70% are generators. We have open, enveloping auras that everything is just welcomed in. Everything is brought in. The manifestor has a closed and repelling aura. It doesn't let things in. The reflector, it's like Teflon. It just bounces off. It's like they're untouchable. And the projector is a finely tuned, sharp needle pointing in to the G center, to the center of direction. And they're witnessing a world. They're witnessing a world where hearts are upset because the mind is just... And so when they see that, they might get bitter. If the mind is making decisions But when the body is operating correctly, it doesn't matter what the mind does. Because the mind can complain, it can whine, it can scream, it can kick, but the body's going to do what the body is going to do. And in that, we have the beauty of the magical formula for surrender called strategy and authority. Peace be with you.